Eleanor Williams stood in line at Henderson's grocery store, her weathered hands gripping a small basket filled with the basics: bread, milk, eggs, and a can of soup. At 78 years old, she moved slowly, her back bent from decades of hard work. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her clothes, though clean, showed their age. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she waited behind a young mother buying organic vegetables and expensive wine. Eleanor counted the crumpled bills in her worn leather purse one more time, her fingers trembling slightly. She had exactly $12.37. When her turn came, she placed her items carefully on the conveyor belt. The cashier, a teenage boy named Ryan, barely looked up from his phone as he scanned each item. The total flashed on the screen: $14.89. Eleanor's heart sank. She had miscalculated. Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you please check that again? I think there might be a mistake." Ryan sighed dramatically and rescanned the items. $14.89, ma'am, same as before." Eleanor opened her purse again, spreading the bills and coins on the counter with shaking hands. Her face flushed red with embarrassment as she realized she was $2.52 short. I don't have enough," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. But what Ryan didn't know was that this frail old woman had a secret that would change everything. Ryan rolled his eyes and looked over Eleanor's shoulder at the growing line of impatient customers. "Well, you'll have to put something back then. I don't have all day." Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for the can of soup, the cheapest item in her basket. I'll just take this off." "Actually, take off the milk too," Ryan said coldly. "That'll bring you under your budget." The customers behind Eleanor began to murmur. A well-dressed man in a business suit checked his expensive watch and muttered, "Some people should count their money before they shop." A woman with designer handbags shook her head. "It's embarrassing, really. Why don't these people shop at discount stores where they belong?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she removed the milk from her purchase. This was her weekly shopping trip, and without the milk, she would have to drink her morning coffee black for another week. "I'm sorry for the trouble," Eleanor whispered, but Ryan had already turned away to talk to another employee about his weekend plans. An elderly gentleman near the back of the line stepped forward. "Ma'am, please let me help you with—" "No, thank you," Eleanor said quickly, her pride still intact despite her embarrassment. "I'll manage just fine." Ryan processed her reduced order with obvious annoyance, slamming each item into a plastic bag. "9:37, he announced, his tone making it clear he thought she was wasting everyone's time. As Eleanor fumbled with her money, her purse slipped from her hands, spilling its contents across the floor. The contents of Eleanor's purse scattered across the grocery store floor. Along with her crumpled bills and loose change, several items caught the light. Old photographs, a small address book, and something that made Ryan pause mid-complaint. It was an old brass key on a faded ribbon attached to a small metal nameplate that read, "Henderson's Grocery, Founder." Eleanor quickly gathered her belongings, but not before several customers noticed the unusual key. The well-dressed businessman who had complained earlier crouched down to help her collect her things. "Ma'am," he said, his tone suddenly respectful, "this key, it's quite old, isn't it?" Eleanor clutched the key protectively. "It was my late husband's," she said simply. Ryan, overhearing the conversation, glanced at the key with confusion. He had worked at Henderson's Grocery for 2 years, but had never seen anything like it. The nameplate looked official, like something from the store's corporate office. "What's that supposed to be?" Ryan asked, his earlier rudeness replaced by curiosity. Eleanor stood slowly, her dignity returning as she held the key close to her heart. "It's nothing that concerns you, young man." But the businessman wasn't ready to let it go. "Henderson's Grocery founder," he read aloud. "Ma'am, how long have you been shopping here?" Eleanor looked around the store, her eyes taking in every detail as if seeing it for the first time in years. "Longer than you might think," she said quietly. What none of them knew was that this key held the answer to a 60-year-old story that would change how everyone in that store saw this humble old woman. As Eleanor held the brass key, her mind drifted back to 1964, when she was just 18 years old and newly married to Robert Williams. They had big dreams and even bigger hearts. Robert had saved every penny from his job at the steel mill, and Eleanor worked as a seamstress, taking in alterations late into the night. Together, they scraped together enough money to buy a small, run-down building on the corner of Maple and 3rd Street. "We're going to build something special, Ellie," Robert had said, using her childhood nickname as they stood in the empty building. "A grocery store where everyone feels welcome, no matter how much money they have." And that's exactly what they did. Henderson's Grocery started as a tiny family business where Eleanor worked the register while Robert stocked shelves and made deliveries. They knew every customer by name, extended credit to families going through hard times, and never turned anyone away for being a few cents short. Eleanor remembered the long hours, the worry about making ends meet, and the joy of watching their little store grow. They hired their first employee, then their second. They expanded into the building next door, then opened a second location across town. For 35 years, Eleanor and Robert poured their hearts into Henderson's Grocery. They treated their employees like family and their customers like friends. The business flourished because it was built on kindness and respect. But life had other plans. Robert suffered a heart attack in 1999, just as big chain stores were moving into their small town. Medical bills piled up, and the stress of competing with larger stores took its toll. With Robert unable to work and Eleanor overwhelmed by the business demands, they made the heartbreaking decision to sell Henderson's Grocery to a large corporation. The sale provided enough money to cover Robert's medical care, but it also meant watching their life's work transform into just another corporate chain store. The new owners kept the Hendersons' name for brand recognition, but the personal touch that had made it special slowly disappeared. As Eleanor stood in the checkout line, still clutching her founder's key, the store manager, Mr. Davidson, happened to walk by. He was a kind man in his 50s who had worked for the corporate chain for over a decade. The businessman who had helped Eleanor gather her things approached him. "Excuse me, but this lady has something I think you should see." Mr. Davidson looked at Eleanor with the same dismissive glance that others had given her, but when he saw the brass key in her hands, his expression changed completely. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "where did you get that key?" Eleanor looked up at him with tired eyes. "My husband and we used to own a little grocery store." Mr. Davidson's face went pale. He had heard stories from older employees about the original Henderson's owners, but he had never expected to meet one of them. "Mrs. Williams," he whispered. The entire checkout area fell silent. Even Ryan stopped mid-conversation and stared. "You're Eleanor Williams," Mr. Davidson continued, his voice filled with awe. "You and your husband Robert, you founded this store." The businessman who had been rude to Eleanor earlier stepped back in shock. You own this place." "Not anymore," Eleanor said sadly. "We sold it years ago when Robert got sick. The medical bills." She trailed off, not wanting to burden strangers with her troubles. Ryan's face turned bright red as he realized how he had treated the woman who had built the very store that employed him. I had no idea," he stammered. Mr. Davidson immediately stepped behind the register. "Mrs. Williams, please. Your groceries are on the house, and I insist you take whatever else you need." But Eleanor shook her head gently. "That's very kind, but I can pay for what I need. I just miscounted today." The crowd that had gathered around them was speechless. The woman they had looked down on, the person they had judged as just another struggling senior citizen, was the founder of the very store where they shopped. Word spread quickly through the store. Employees gathered around, and longtime customers who remembered the old days began to recognize her. Mrs. Patterson, who had shopped at Henderson's for 40 years, pushed through the crowd with tears in her eyes. "Eleanor Williams," she exclaimed, "you gave my family credit during the factory strike in '78. We would have gone hungry without your kindness." What happened next was something Eleanor had never expected. Mr. Davidson called the corporate office while customers and employees gathered around her. Within an hour, the regional manager arrived with a photographer and a reporter from the local newspaper. But more importantly, the people in the store began sharing their stories. Mrs. Patterson talked about the credit Eleanor had extended during hard times. Mr. Jenkins remembered how Robert had personally delivered groceries to his elderly mother every week. Sarah, a longtime employee, recalled how the Williams had paid for her daughter's school clothes when money was tight. "You built more than a grocery store," Mr. Davidson told Eleanor as the crowd listened. "You built a community." Ryan approached Eleanor with tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Williams, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I didn't know." Eleanor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You couldn't have known, dear. But now you do, and that's what matters." The store management insisted on not only giving Eleanor her groceries for free, but also arranged for her to receive a monthly